The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning, and thank you for joining us for today's webinar on the exciting topic of minimizing mail returns. I am Nick McLaughlin, member of the sales and marketing team here at AmeriCollect, and I get to be your administrator for today's webinar. If you have a question for us at some point throughout the webinar, please type it in the question box or shoot Kenlin or I an email, and we'll get back to you immediately after the webinar. Those email addresses are kenlin@americollect.com or nick@americollect.com. We'll get back to you shortly. Now to introduce our speaker, Kenlin Gretz. Kenlin is the president and CEO here at AmeriCollect, the ridiculously nice early out and bad debt collection agency. Kenlin, how can we reduce the crazy number of mail returns we get each month?
Well, that's what I'm going to tell you about. Thanks, Nick, for introducing me. Appreciate that. Happy 4th of July week as we celebrate our great country's birthday. What an exciting time. Nick, I'm sure you're going to be spending some time fishing with your kids. Is that right?
That's the plan.
All right. Well, enjoy the time and be safe with those fireworks. So minimizing your mail returns. Let's get into it. I'm Kenlin Gretz, the CEO. Thank you. I'm super proud of our organization. We as a collection agency are trying to change how collection agencies are viewed by being ridiculously nice. Well, for 9 consecutive years in a row, we've made the list of best call centers to work for. It used to be known as best places to work in collections. They changed the name this year. We've been #1 in the country, and in 2013 and 2014, making the list is just an honor. We've got a great culture, and we attribute that culture to being super nice to the patients that you let us collect from. So thank you so much for that. Again, I'm honored to be working in an organization that values the people and really lets them know that there is a career for you here in collections. And so thank you for the words that I got. I got a bunch of emails from clients saying congratulations. So let's move on. It's not legal advice. Get your own attorney. Mail returns, I'd say 10 years ago, we used to focus our training on how to find people after you got the mail return. And it was about 4 years ago, we said, you know what? Let's focus on getting it right the first time. Nobody likes the Elvis. Well, I like the Elvis song. Return to sender, address unknown. So there's no mute button that Nick has. I just keep rolling even though I sing very poorly. So anyway, getting it right the first time. Let's talk a little bit about that. Oh, yeah, you're supposed to be on mute, Nick. Anyway, moving data. I mean, the statistics here from the U.S. Census, 21% moved to a different county in the same state. Knowing these kinds of things, 61% of the movers stayed within the same county. Those are things that you have to think about when you're trying to find a consumer. That's important information, the mobility. The part that 53% have moved within a year. That's important. Renters are more than 4 times likely to move than homeowners. Share this information with your patient access people so that they know that they're getting true and accurate addresses right from the start. 22% of all people living in renter-occupied housing units lived elsewhere. That means that they're moving a lot. Again, there's the link to the data regarding that. But let your staff know that addresses are super important. When you think about how you collect money from patients, the insurance, and then sending statements out. If you can't send statements out efficiently, that's a big chunk of money for those collectible, the collections of co-insurance and deductibles. There's wonderful organizations out there that help you validate addresses. Experian, TransUnion, Equifax, those are the 3 major credit reporting agencies. It's expensive, but you can do an integration with them. Now, again, it's only as accurate as the data that they have. There is a great percentage of the population that is unbanked, meaning that they don't have credit files. So point of service verification tools, things that are integrated to your system, you type in an address and it'll come back and say, yeah, this is an address that we've had on file for patient Mark Smith. So an interesting possibility that many organizations use, but those point of service verifications are expensive to do. How about just training your staff? Would you please give me your address? instead of saying, is everything the same? We've heard it, I've talked about it, I'm not going to go too deep into this. Would you please give me your mailing address, followed by what is your physical address? Many areas use post office boxes often over physical addresses, or would you give me your mailing address? I'll need to verify the address with an external system, letting them know that you're going to be doing some checking, so you want true and accurate addresses from the thing. A tool that we find helpful, you can do things in batch file with Melissa Data. Melissa Data is a free tool. They give you a certain number of free lookups, but if you just clear your cache a couple of times, so you can look up, here's the free lookup. It's a wonderful website, easy to get around. You can just copy and paste and put in any address here. I'm going to put this address in here. This is an address I know doesn't exist in Manitowoc. And it'll tell me some things. They parsed out the address. It says I can search for house numbers on Lincoln Street in zip code 54221. I can search for houses that start with 652 in this zip code. I can look for street names that are close. Maybe I had Lincoln. It wasn't Lincoln, but it was something close. A real wonderful tool on the back end to help you skip trace when you do get a mail return. So it's a pretty cool tool, I think, anyway. So that's Melissa Data. It's a free tool. Use it as you need it. You can also use it on the front end too. If a patient gives you an address, you can plug it in and verify that it's an actual street in an actual city and a house number that is registered. So you can use this free tool from Melissa Data. It's a little manual, but you know, for onesie-twosie. You know, once in a while we hear from patients, they never sent me a bill the day as you, the medical provider, and maybe you hear it too. The truth is that there could be some truth to it, that maybe they never did get the bill, and maybe you never got the notification that the mail was returned or not delivered. So I want you to think a little bit about what we're going to be talking about today is not so much how to find people after you get a mail return, but to prevent it from happening in the beginning. And all of this centers around your statement vendor. Now, we've used 4 or 5 different statement vendors over the years. Just last October, actually it took us about 4 months, we went through an RFP to interview about 7 vendors, and we narrowed it down to 3. And over the years, I've learned that when you choose a statement vendor, sexy is cool, the beautiful look of the statement, the design, one of them called it, they've got a heat map to tell you where the patients look. All of that is cool. But what about what's under the hood? The data portion of the delivery of the statement is really important. There's 3 things we're going to talk about: CAS certification, address element correction, and NCOA data. Those are the main 3 things we're going to talk about. It's a little kind of yawn boring, but when I show you some of the numbers that we researched, you'll be very surprised how important they are. Now, these 3 things, CAS certification, address element correction, and NCOA data, are products of the United States Postal Service. If you have a vendor that says, oh, we do data cleansing does not mean that they're using these products from the United States Postal Service. They cost money. Sometimes statement vendors roll these costs into the cost of their product. That's really important for you to understand. So some of these products, with a combination of the 3 of them, they can tell you in advance if the mail will be returned. Think about that. When you send a statement out, I'd like to know in advance if that letter is going to get returned. And that's very valuable because immediately I can find out and get on the phone and get the correct information or do my searching instead of waiting for that mail piece to come back to sit on someone's desk. I've been through offices before where I've seen mail returns, boxes of them, nobody doing anything with them. And all of a sudden, not 1 statement, but 4 statements go out before you realize and have somebody get to the ugly job of opening up mail returns and trying for skip tracing. So that number 4 step, with steps number 1, 2, and 3, you can get a very accurate, advanced way to know if the mail is returned. And number 5, give you address corrections. That's when somebody says, I've changed my address and I've moved from Sunray Lane to Lincoln Ridge. So we're going to talk about data management. We're going to talk a little bit about that. The three processes you need to get your head around, and you almost have to study them a little bit yourself. I've found that statement vendors sort of, oh yeah, we do this, and sometimes the salesperson really doesn't know what they do. CAS, AEC, and NCOA. We're going to talk about those processes and what they are. CAS stands for Coding Accuracy Support System. I don't know. The United States Postal Service came up with the name. I'll say this. Let me explain. A statement vendor, almost all of them have a CAS certification process. They take your data file, all of your addresses, and they send them out to this vendor. I'll say this, not all CAS vendors are created equal. When we did the RFP, we took our existing vendors' data and we asked them which one of these didn't CAS certify. And what a CAS certification is really it's adding the ZIP+4, it's getting the addresses in the right format. If street is ST or is it really STREET, those kind of technical things. But remember, we have systems that are reading the mail. And if those systems don't have it exactly right, they create mail returns that are not necessary. So you have to CAS certify first. So we took a sample of about 1,000 test records, and we took the same test records, and we said, see how many of them you can get to CAS certify. And we found out that the vendors that the United States Postal Service certifies to become have different processes so that you may get more or less certified. You want more certified. That means you're going to find more changes of addresses, more mail returns in advance, more addresses being forwarded. So that's the test that we did. We took 1,000 test records. But again, all of them say, oh, well, we CAS certified. Great. Not all CAS certification is created equal. Here's a simple example. This address, you might, your patient access people might have used 2515 CTH, standing for County Highway H, Grand Rapids, Michigan, when really the postal address knows that road as County Highway. Will that mail piece, even if it wasn't CAS certified, get delivered? It probably will if you hand write the address. Because what's going to happen then is the optical readers are going to just read the zip code, the city, the state, and the zip, and it's going to get it to Grand Rapids. And the local postman in the post office is going to say, CTH, oh yeah, that he knows. But if you're using a system to send thousands of statements out, it may not CAS certify, and you might not get the address correction that's related to that. It also cleans up and adds ZIP+4 for quicker delivery, those kinds of things. There's a lot of things that CAS does. But so we got the basics of CAS. CAS is the first step that you always do, and most statement vendors offer it. The next thing is address element correction. It's kind of like CAS certification, but on steroids. When an address is inaccurate or missing an element, there's a chance the United States Postal Service certified their matching software may lack enough information to deliver the piece of mail, and you're going to get the mail piece. This is the one that we found most interesting. Of the 5 vendors we interviewed, they all said that they had data cleansing. And when we asked deeper questions, do you do address element correction? Only 3 of them did. 1 rolled up the cost within their price, the other charged per piece. When we did the testing of those 3, it was amazing. So in order to get address element correction, you have to CAS certify. So that's the prerequisite, is that they have to CAS certify. And so then the next step is address element correction. You can also, and we do run the ones that don't certify through address element correction. Here's an example. Well, I've got the website link there. If you just Google United States Postal Service address element correction, you'll come up with the same link that I have there, that you want to read more and learn more about it. Here's an example. If an address on the mail piece is misfingered and it's typed the wrong way, so 3117 WWET Mont, Connecticut, okay, when the real address is Westmount. Now, you will probably get that as a mail return on a statement that you mail out. Now, if you hand wrote it and gave it to the postman, he would probably say, oh, they know it's Westmount. Address element correction will correct those things. They'll look at the house number, they'll look at the last 4 digits or the four characters of the street, and they'll say, you know what, I bet you it's this one, and it'll correct it. So what's the cost? And this cost is direct from the United States Postal Service. It's a fee of 2.4 cents per address submitted with a minimum fee of 24 bucks. So you don't have to submit every address on every statement. And so that's important to remember. When you talk to a statement vendor, why should I pay that 2.4 cents per address every time I send a statement when I know if this is a new address that I'm sending to, then send it to address element correction. If it's not a new address, I already know that it cleared address element correction because you store it in your system. And so a sophisticated statement vendor isn't going to charge you for every letter that you send out. They're going to charge you on the new ones that were not previously address element correction, and that's a fair way to charge. So that's the red bullet that I have here. The memory of past addresses will decrease your cost in this. They tell us, the United States Postal Service tells us that they estimate a correction return rate of 38%. So that's how successful they are. So when they send in a file, they're going to say, you know what, we're going to correct about 38%. If CAS can't get them to certify, we're going to correct 38%. Those are big numbers. Once you find out from your statement vendor, just simply ask the question, hey, what percent of my letters going out are not CAS certified? 10%, 20%, 5%? It's likely that chunk, a good chunk of them are coming back as mail returns. And if you have address element correction working in your favor, that's a big reduction of that mail piece coming back. Another thing we're going to talk about is the national change of address. This is when you, the patient, move from Sunray Lane to Lincoln Ridge. You go to the Postal Service website or you go there and you fill out the form. If you are mailing statements, even if your statement vendor is scrubbing for NCOA, you should still be putting address service requested on the outside of your mail pieces. Let me explain to you why. The NCOA database is only as good as how often the database is compiled and updated. Again, statement vendors use another company to scrub their NCOA. Are they using the current data? Now, I just recently moved. So I live in Green Bay. I moved, and I moved from Sunray to Lincoln Ridge. Lincoln Ridge is a new street. And I talked to the post office about this, and I said, all right, so I forwarded my mail, the mailbox is up, and how long is it going to take for it to actually populate in the NCOA database? And she said it could probably take anywhere from 60 to 90 days for all statement providers to get it right. But that doesn't mean if you send it to Sunray Lane, if you have address service requested on the outside, you're going to get a postal card in the mail. That's like a half a sheet of paper, a thicker cardboard card. You can also get that electronically too, by the way, if you wanted to. But that's why you want to have address service requested. Those changes that are not yet into the NCOA database, but are at the local post office, that the people there know, will give you that card. And it's a wonderful thing. One of the things that we noticed and studied was that an old vendor of ours, we noticed that we had a huge spike in these cards. And so we did some analysis on it. We said, you know what, we got the feeling that, well, that's how we knew that a good percentage of the data was not being cast. If you don't cast, it's very hard to get the national change of address database to work correctly. So this is just some information here is just so I'll explain the columns. We started monitoring the weekly send of statements that we send out with the old vendor, the percent of NCO, the number of hits, and the percent. And again, remember what I said, if you don't have a good CAS or address element process, then you're not going to get a lot of change of addresses. You won't know that they moved. And so you see our percentage was anywhere, and this is a high volume of statements that we were sending out on a weekly basis, anywhere from 4, 5, 6, high of 6. Well, when we tested out the final 3 vendors that had address element correction, we took the 1,050 accounts and we said, let's see what percent we can get the NCOA hit. And you'll see that vendor 1 had 7%, vendor 2, 4%, and vendor 3, 9.8%. Now that's a lot of people that are not going to probably get your statement. And then what we did is we looked at, well, how many of them did we get an address change card for? And so this was a separate test here. We took those paper cards that were not picked up in the electronic NCOA address change process, and we sent them as a separate sample to these same 3 vendors. And it's interesting how they picked those up, 88 and 86. But this brown one here, vendor number 2, brown, orange, whatever color, interesting. I'm telling you that, I hear people, oh, they switch statement providers because, oh, they have this really cool whatever. I mean, for me, it's about getting the mail piece to them. Yeah, pretty is cool. I get that, but it's more important for me to have, if I can bump my change of address rate from, these are real numbers. If you can increase 50,000 by 2%, that more people, that you get more, that's a big number for me. I'm sure it's a big number for you. Again, not sexy, but you figure this out, and what we put up is we put in our contract that if they change their CAS certification, ACE address element correction vendors that they use, or their NCOA vendors, that we get notified in advance so that we can do some testing to see really if they're good. So vendor selection. What will this all do? It's going to tell you in advance if the mail will be returned. I'll tell you, once we figured this out, we had, just like you guys, we had bins of mail returns. Just not fun. We reduced our paper mail returns by about 65% because we fine-tuned the opportunity to know in advance if that mail is returned. And a person can forward their mail for 15 days up to 6 months. They can also file an extension for another 6 months. It's real important to make sure that you're utilizing the data that you get back. Questions to ask your vendors: how often is the data refreshed? If you have a coworker that changed an address, send them a test statement every day and see how soon before you actually get the address correction. That'll give you the NCOA data can be stored. Most agencies or most vendors look for the data 18 months. So that's the data. There is a look back of a 48-month look back, though, that you can, it's called NCOA Link. You can do NCOA Link 18 or NCOA Link 48. We have not used the NCOA Link 48 yet. We're looking at testing it on second placements. Those accounts that were with a primary collection agency, and then they're now placed with us. And so that process, we're hoping to get flying before the end of summer here, and to test that out and to say, wow, could we pick up, more mail returns or more address corrections by NCOA 48? It's the look back of how long ago did they change. So lots of cool things. The other thing that we noticed was the matching mechanism for NCOA. And are you leaving data on the table? Well, I'll talk a little bit about this. This is a sample file. Well, it's actually a sample file of about 5 or 6 different vendors. You get a file back from your statement provider. Don't assume that it's easily mapped and easily understood, because it's not. You might, and every statement binder does this, you might get an NCAA code. You might be given the move type, I for individual, F for family, B for business, the move date. It might give you what the address element name is. So this is what's in your system, Tommy Smith, but this is what he gave the Postal Service as Thomas J. Smith. It's very valuable information. So take a deeper look at what's in that data file that you're getting back. Make sure you're not leaving any of that data on the table. And again, it's taken us years to really dig in and figure out every one of those is going to get you more statements delivered, more revenue. The other thing that's important to understand is how do they match? So you might have in your system Ronnie Barker. How is it smart enough to know that Ronald and Ronnie are the same? Now, those are things that you can test out yourself by looking at, well, here's how you test it out. Look at the paper address correction cards that you get from the post office. Those are ones that your NCOA electronic data matching did not get. Should it pick it up? If it's a good system, it should know that Ronnie and Ronald at the same address are most likely the same person. Things like 1478, the word South written out, and it's really South Wall Street. So those are tests that you want to kind of send off and find out. You have a coworker that's, that's moving. Play around, use a dummy account, send out some letters, see if they pick up partial spellings, change the address a little bit, and see how well they pick that kind of information up. That one's a real hard test to figure out if they're failing a lot or a little. But the matching mechanism is important. Some vendors have their NCOA matching set to it has to be exactly the way that the consumer entered it at the Postal Service when they went online to change their address. Others have more sophisticated matching, and they know that Joe, J-O-E, and Joseph are predominantly the same people. Important things to know. Again, that paper address correction card, why do you get them? You get them most likely because your statement vendor, if you get a lot of them, I have no data to tell you what's a lot. You just gotta have to look at the card and say, well, why wouldn't they pick this up? It's got the same first name and last name. Why wouldn't the NCOA electronic process pick this up? And that's what it's telling you. Interesting information. Many of your organizations have two systems, a physician's billing account. I've run out of time here, so I want to get going. Making sure that both systems have the same address. We've done this for a couple of clients. What we do is if there was an address change in one system, we then query the other system to find out and make sure that they're absolutely the same. Of course, if you're emailing statements, one of the concerns there is eventually they might become a non-payer. If they become a non-payer, boy, it's important to send them a piece of mail with address service correction every now and again. The average person forwards their mail for 6 months, so maybe every 4 months. Send them something physical in the mail with address service correction so that you can update their physical address, or make sure that your patient access is really asking deep questions, because you never know how often they're actually hitting your facility. Reading your mail returns, the physical mail return piece that you get, there's some codes to it. I've got this here. I'm not going to go over this. You can read that yourself. It's kind of interesting. There are more things on here than you know. To read that little yellow sticker on the outside, so that people are doing your physical mail returns. And again, not all mail returns are created equal. Just like a cow, when you cut it up, certain part of the meat is really, you're going to be cooking out this weekend. That's why I thought of this. So the chuck roast versus the sirloin, definite difference. There you go. When you're working your mail returns, remember to take the easy ones first. There are certain mail returns that are easy to solve with using companies like Melissa Data. No such office in state, no such street. I've labeled these as easy and a solution on what to do for these. So the people that work here, the ones that are hard, you know what? Address you refuse to accept mail or pay postage charges on it. So if they're refusing your mail, I got the feeling you're not going to collect any money from them. Mail return to sender under false representation order. We have no clue what that means. But it's anyway, I've got them sorted here, or not sorted, but labeled easy or hard. It's important to the people that are working your mail returns to know what that yellow sticker and the words on there mean. No mail receptacle, that means they probably have a P.O. box, that there's no mail receptacle at the address. But you got to be able to get a hold of them and find out what the post office box they're using. Again, I'm not going to get too deep in this. You can read this over, share this with your people that are working on those accounts if they're not on the call. So, address element correction is what you get back. And there's certain codes and descriptions that go with it. Each statement vendor is going to have probably a different description. They might use the Postal Service description, or they might have their own. They might have a different code. So what we did is we started analyzing these address element corrections that we were getting back and saying, you know what, they're not all created equal. So this was the number and the percent, and so this was, it's hard to explain what we did. We looked at a deeper look at the data, and we said, you know what, instead of suppressing all of these, let's see if the local postman could still get it delivered. And so we did some testing. The biggest one we had was the general. They didn't give us a real specific reason why address element kicked it back, but what we did is we forced it through. We said, if you get a general AEC kickback, that it's going to be a mail return, let's send it through. And we found that 460 of them were successful, and 43 were not. We eventually got them back as a mail return anyway. And that's really important. So again, without getting into the meat of this, and when you get the data file back from your statement vendor, really know that you gotta start doing some data analysis on it, saying, I want you to suppress this code, but I want you to forward this code, because we think that postman that works at that local store, that local office, is going to be able to figure it out and get it to the right person, because they're helpful and they're good people, and you're a good hospital. So, you know what? I just think I lost some internet connectivity, but that's all right. So I think I'm still connected to the phone here. Not sure what happened there. So I'm going to just wind this down and tell you that we do have a webinar coming up in August. I'm not sure what happened. My screen is locked here, so I apologize about that. And we hope that you have a great 4th of July week. Thank you so much.